Hello. I'm filming again today from Mexico City, Mexico. We are in our last few days of house sit number 9, so I wanted to make our wrap-up video before we leave here for house sit number 10 in San Miguel de Allende. Before I get into this video, I just want to say briefly that this will be our second to last house sit video, as after our next house sit number 10, which begins in a few days, we will be heading to Japan. So more information on that coming soon, lots of updates and announcements along the way, as we will definitely be bringing y'all along with us while we're house hunting and going through the whole process of trying to immigrate to Japan. But back to the topic at hand, which is house sit number 9. It's in Mexico City, Mexico, which has a population of 22 million. So not only is it the biggest city that I've ever been in, it is the biggest city on the North American continent. This is our third time visiting Mexico City, and this house sit was in the neighborhood Colonia Cuauhtémoc. The duration of the house sit was a little over 3 weeks, 25 days, and like the majority of our house sits, it was booked via the Facebook group House and Pet Sitting in Mexico. The host, I can't remember if she responded to my post, which just introduces ourselves and says the dates that we have available for house sits, or if I responded to her post. If I remember correctly, she responded to our post and asked if we were interested in coming to Mexico City, which, having been here twice before and loved it, and it worked out perfectly with our travel dates and the direction we were driving between house sits, of course, we weren't going to turn down this opportunity. As with all of our sits, this is a no money exchange, so we're trading our time for taking care of the cats, taking care of our house, and in this instance, taking care of the potted rooftop garden in exchange for staying in her home and having all utilities paid. Which means that the cost of this house sit is primarily just our travel expenses to get here, and then our own food and entertainment, whatever we choose to spend while we're here. So looking briefly at our travel expenses to get from house sit number 8 here to house sit number 9, it cost us $50 in gas and $50 to drive the toll highways instead of the free highways. In addition to that, we spent $10 on food on the road while we were driving, and an Airbnb for 2 nights prior to the house sit was $90. So that's a bit of a extra expense that I chose to do. I wanted to stay very close to this house sit in an Airbnb prior to the house sit starting, not only because she wanted to meet the day before to go over everything and meet the cats, but also she was letting us park in her building, so we didn't have to rent an Airbnb with a parking spot. As you can imagine, parking in a city with 22 million people is not super easy. So because of that, that brings the total gas 50, tolls 50, food 10, and Airbnb 90. That brings the cost for us to get here 2 days prior to the sit starting to $200. That being said, it is one of the more expensive areas that we've stayed, probably the most expensive. Mexico City, although it's a huge city and it has everything. So you can make a trip to Mexico City as inexpensive or as expensive as you like. It has, on one block, it will have everything from 50-cent tacos to fine dining and everything in between. So the choices for how much we spent on food and entertainment, and considering that it was the holidays, Christmas, and New Year while we were here, we did splurge a little bit going out to enjoy ourselves. We got to be tourists in Mexico City, so we went out to eat more than I care to admit, and it was wonderful, so no regrets there. I will add, though, to counter effect the cost of getting here and staying 2 nights prior in the Airbnb and all of that, so spending $200 just to get to this 25-day house sit, countering that, having a place to park our car for free for a total of 27 days um, is definitely a great perk. Which brings us to the perks of this house sit. Of course, the biggest perk, honestly, are the two fluffy city kitties that we've been babysitting. Giacomo, also known as Big Fluff, and Penelope, known as Mini Fluff, have been very entertaining and wonderful companions for our time here. When we first came to meet them the day before the house sit, they were very aloof and were obviously just completely unfazed, not thrilled to meet us as you would expect a cat to be. But during the sit, they've become very cuddly. This is possibly because it's December and it was a particularly cold December in Mexico City, so temperatures were a little chillier than these cats might be used to it being, so they were very snugly in the blankets and sitting on our laps for body heat. But regardless, if it was for the temperature or not, they were very good little fluffy companions and brought us great entertainment for our 3 weeks here. The location of the apartment in Colonia Cuauhtémoc is fantastic. I mentioned previously we've been to Mexico City twice before, and each time we've stayed in a different neighborhood, somewhat walkable to each other. We're about a 75-minute walk from the first place we stayed, which was in Barrio Chino, the Chinatown down by the Centro Histórico. And we did walk there from this sit, so it is definitely doable to walk Mexico City. It's a very walkable, green, wonderful city for that. However, this neighborhood in particular, just going down and out the front door of our building, there are more restaurants and things to do than we could possibly do in our time here. It's just a hip little neighborhood with great food. I mentioned previously everything from taco carts to fine dining, all on the same block. And being just a few blocks from Reforma, which is one of the main thoroughfares, it's really easy to catch public transportation, and there's always things to do along Reforma. In fact, tonight is New Year's Eve, and they've been preparing, blocking off Reforma, so there's barricades where it looks like they're going to be stopping the cars and making this massive avenue a pedestrian mall temporarily. They've set up a big stage. So it's a really, really just fun, great neighborhood to be in for having 3 weeks in Mexico City to enjoy ourselves. The apartment itself is also really fantastic. Private rooftop garden. So we're on the 5th floor here. The stairs behind me go up to her potted plant garden upstairs, and I'll be showing some photos over this so you can see the view and see how beautiful her garden itself is. So, I mean, this is just like amazing. One of the only apartments in this building to have a private rooftop. The view is great. It's just a great place to relax in the evening or do some work in the morning. Definitely one of the coolest views of all the house sits that we've had. Also, not that crime is a big issue, but the building itself is very secure. So there is a 24-hour doorman, and even before you can put the key in the outside door to get in the building, he unlocks the door for you and lets you in. In addition to the parking that I mentioned previously is very secure. It's only the people in this building allowed to park there, which even though we're on the 5th floor, there's not a ton of apartments in this building. It's not like a skyrise or anything. So I definitely feel beyond secure with the amount of security in place for the building itself. I mentioned previously that this house sit is in exchange for all utilities. So of course we have electricity, gas, internet, and a washer and a dryer is not very common in Mexico. So we have a washer combined with using a drying rack on the outside balcony, which combined with a kitchen, that's all the amenities that we would need. This cool water filter is made out of terracotta clay and allows you to drink tap water with no problems. It's great because then you don't have to deal with the big 10-gallon garrafones of water. Of course, having our host as another new friend in Mexico is definitely another perk of this house sit. She's been very friendly throughout the whole process, from initial contact in Facebook to making sure the timing would work out with everyone's travel plans, through when we met her in person the first time 2 days prior to the house sit starting. We came and parked here first prior to going to our Airbnb, and then she invited us over again the next day to hang out for a couple hours, meet the cats, drink some coffee, and just see how they responded to us. The next day she left for her trip, and since then we've been in pretty much daily contact through WhatsApp. She's sharing photos from her trip, and we're sharing photos from Mexico City. Even though Mexico City's been her home for about 10 years, she's happy to see photos of the cats and the city and how we're enjoying things. So it's just great to know the next time we come back to Mexico City, we'll have another friend to come visit. I mentioned previously that the timing worked out perfectly, so we will be heading straight from this house sit to our next house sit in San Miguel, which is just a few hours north of here, without having to rent an Airbnb in between. We could not have asked for better timing, which is the way somehow almost all of our house sits have worked out. Moving quickly into the responsibilities of this house sit, there's not a whole lot of responsibilities when it's just two kitties, but of course the basics: food, water, and companionship. They need their kitty bowls kept full at all times, fresh water in their water bowls daily, and between 4 and 6 p.m. they get a wet food dinner. But I did not need to set an alarm for that, as there's no way the kitties were going to let us miss dinner. Being long-hair kitties, they also needed some brushing, and of course, being indoor city kitties, they needed their litter boxes changed daily. There's two litter boxes throughout the apartment. And I mentioned previously that it was a little cold during this trip, so they did a lot of cuddling, which of course I'm not going to complain about. And of course, having a beautiful rooftop garden means that we had to water and just keep an eye on the garden itself. You can see there's plants throughout the house here. So there's indoor plants, there's outdoor plants on the downstairs balcony, and then the entire rooftop garden is full of plants as well. So it was quite a bit of watering, but not a big deal. And probably the biggest responsibility while we were here was keeping an eye on the cats while we were enjoying the rooftop garden. So Minnie Fluff in particular is quite an escapista, and she actually tries to crawl over the 5th floor balcony railing and go to the building next door, which is a very scary thought. So they were pretty good. I noticed while we were here the day before the house sit, visiting on the rooftop garden, every few minutes she was trying to go over the railing, and our host would get up and, redirect her, and a few minutes later she would try again. And after a certain number of tries, she eventually realized that today was not the day that she was going to escape to the building next door. But when we were here, she wasn't trying as much. So there's sort of the opposite of some of our other experiences with pets, where I feel like other people's pets see us as substitute teachers, and they can maybe try and get away with more things that they know they can't get away with their own people. But in this instance, I feel like Minnie Fluff was the opposite, and she was not trying to escape quite as much while the substitute teachers were here. And that wraps up our video for house sit number 9 in Mexico City. I just want to close by saying again that December was a really great time to be in Mexico City for Christmas and New Year's. The city itself is just very festive and lively, and a wonderful place to be for the holidays. Also, Mexico City is home to one of the few Lutheran churches in Mexico, so we were able to have a congregation to be with during the holidays. We went to a number of services and we got to experience our first Mexican posada, which is a holiday tradition that we had not experienced before, complete with piñatas and, of course, some really good food. And while we were at the posada, we met some really nice new friends who we will definitely be keeping in touch with. And they were nice enough to invite us into their home for Christmas dinner, which they celebrate on Christmas Eve night. We had a wonderful late evening Christmas Eve dinner and spent hours talking long into Christmas morning. So that was, for us, a really great way to spend the holidays, have some friends and companionship, as well as experience a new tradition. That's it for this video, but of course we'll keep you updated with all of our upcoming travels and plans on our social media pages, Facebook and Instagram, as well as on our website, Travel Journal on bentonhomestead.com. Of course, if you like these videos, please feel free to leave a comment about what you like, what you don't like, and what you'd like to see more or less of in the future. That would be really helpful as we try and figure out what kind of videos y'all are interested in, what kind of information you like as we continue house sitting throughout Mexico and soon as we land in Japan. So please keep in touch, hit the subscribe button, and we'll see you in the next video.